What's going on, everybody? TH back again with another video, and today we begin our season preview series. Gonna go division by division. Unless you guys want to go team by team, let me know that down below in the comment section. But today we are breaking down the AFC North. We'll go ahead and kick things off with the Baltimore Ravens. And this is a division I follow pretty closely. As many of you probably know, I'm a Steelers fan, so a lot of ties within this division. But that being said, I'm also like a major Lamar Jackson stan. So this is another team that I keep pretty close tabs on. But let's go ahead and start by talking about the offensive line, and then we're going to go group by group, a little bit of a recap of what happened last year, record-wise, division rank. And the Ravens were, the one seed in the AFC, one of the best teams in football. And also, one more question I'd love to get some feedback on in the comment section. One, do you guys like divisions, or do you guys want to do this by teams? Secondly, I did RLAD screenshots, so that way we had a reference to the actual lineup as opposed to me just talking about it. I did think about doing the PFF lineups, so we could get PFF grades and then, kind of a number that kind of signifies maybe where their strengths and weaknesses are. It's a little bit more of engaging of a visual, but at the same time, I struggle with not having the depth in there because, it's a 53-man roster. The best teams in the league have great depth, and I want to highlight that in these videos. So let me know your preference. Again, aesthetically wise, I think the PFF screenshots might be a little bit better, but RLADS gives us the depth, and I kind of like that a lot too. So let me know your preference on what I should do lineup wise in these videos. All that aside, let's talk about the Baltimore Ravens. Offensive line, I'm going to give it a B. And you see some training camp hype for Andrew Voorhees. I've been, clamoring for him this whole entire process. Really had no issues with him becoming a starter. And really, I think Ben Cleveland's probably the weak link of that offensive line. Even when you look at, Ben Cleveland or rookie Roger Rosengarten, don't want to get, I don't want to put the cart in front of the horse, horse too far in front of the cart. He is a rookie, but to me, he's got such sound pass protection skills, really light on his feet. I think he'll stick in and be just fine. I think you got a swing guy in Patrick McCarry for depth. And then Ronnie Stanley there at left tackle. Yeah, he's had injury issues, but they even bring in Josh Jones, former Cardinal, and I believe former Texan last year. And whenever he's gotten to play left tackle in his career, he's been rock solid. Not as good at right tackle or playing on the inside, but left tackle, he's been rock solid. So actually, they got the perfect Ronnie Stanley contingency. So I think this is a solid starting five with a couple of new starters, but also got some good depth in there with McCarry as well as Josh Jones. So I'm not worried about this offensive line whatsoever. I'm not saying it's going to be elite. At the same time, I think it's going to exceed a lot of people's expectations. Then we get to the quarterback and skill group. I'm going to go A-. Again, I'm a huge Lamar Jackson fan. The ultimate irony here is that I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, but I just had a dynasty draft with ESPN's Matt Miller, actually. My first round pick was Lamar Jackson. It's a guy I love watching, and also in a dynasty league, give me that, quarterback in their 20s still with a ton of fantasy juice. So excited about that, but excited about another year in this Todd Monken offense. I am accounting offensive and defensive play callers a little bit into this. So here, talking about Todd Monken, I think automatically proved last year he's one of the best OCs. And, the spread to run makes so much more sense than these tight condensed sets that Greg Roman's known for. 22 personnel, sure, in theory it could work with Lamar Jackson, or even 12 personnel. Yeah, it could work. But also when you have three receivers and, just one tight end, one running back, you're spreading the defense out so much more that you're creating more open space for Lamar. So I think Monken, just that little bit of a switch in mentality. A lot of the same Greg Roman stuff from the run game standpoint, but he opened it up from a pass game standpoint. The addition of Zay Flowers was huge. Mark Andrews, hopefully he's healthy this year, but even Isaiah Likely, that's good depth. Rashad Bateman, they get back at a little over $5 million a year. Bateman's been a disappointing first-round pick, but he's not that disappointing. He's not like John Ross, get this guy out of the league or anything like that. So to get him at $5 million against the cap is really, really impressive. And then the wild card here is Tez Walker. Can he be that, to steal a phrase from Matt Harmon, can he be the sacrificial X here? Can he play on the line of scrimmage, be that Marcus Velding-Scantling and, beat press coverage, stretch the field, be that guy that forces safeties to think, okay, well, I can't crash down too hard because what if Tez Walker gets behind this guy? So if he brings that one little bit of element of change, then he's worth it, because he alone could be one of the avenues to beating man coverage for this squad. But also Lamar Jackson's legs, naturally you are just not as inclined to play, man coverage against Lamar because, zone, you're going to have defenders with their eyes on him. So, I think Tez plus Lamar could be the way that the Ravens minimize the amount of man coverage they're going to see, because Zay Flowers not the biggest guy, Rashad Bateman not the biggest guy. We'd like to see them working against zone. And I think Todd Monken does a great job dissecting that, Lamar Jackson was money attacking the middle of the field. So again, want to see this team attacking a lot of zone coverage, and I think Tez is a good step in the right direction, of course, with Lamar Jackson. Pass rush, I'll go B, and you'll see, I'm using ESPN's pass rush win rate. I'm a PFF premium subscriber. Actually, I get it as a data collector for them, but there is no team pass rush win rate I've seen in premium, so maybe I'm off for PFF Plus, I think is what they're calling it now. And I don't have Ultimate, so I don't get to see the team pass rush or win rate. The only free pass rush or win rate, say that 15 times fast, is ESPN's, and I don't really love ESPN's way of doing this. It's basically, did you beat your guy in 2.5 seconds, yes or no? To me, I think there's a little bit more nuance, but it's the only thing I have. So Ravens did finish top 10. I think a lot of that does have to go to Mike McDonald. But that being said, they bring back Justin Madubuike. I think that was massive, the amount of turnover that they've had on the defensive side. Keep that cornerstone breakout guy, that's Madubuike. And then Ojabo, really interested to see what he looks like this year. Odafe always coming off a breakout year, and they have just enough there at that edge group to where it's like, could it get better? Sure. Is it a weakness? Not really. So they have just enough pieces there, and when you have that interior force like Madubuike, everything else looks a little bit better. And then run defense, you can see middle of the pack. Again, turnover, Mike McDonald gone, as well as Patrick Queen gone. He's I had problems with Patrick Queen, but crashing downhill, he's gotten a whole lot better at that, and he's a violent downhill linebacker. So that's going to be interesting. Can they replace him? I like Trenton Simpson coming out of Clemson, so I'm not too worried about it. Middle of the pack, B, maybe a little bit generous there. Could notch this down to a B-. Pass defense, you can see second in EPA per pass, negative .02. That's crazy. So yeah, and I think Brandon Stevens, another full year as a starter, another offseason under his belt. He was a guy that I don't want to say broke out into stardom last year, but broke out in a way that I was like, damn, I just didn't see Brandon Stevens becoming a more than reliable starter, and I think he played pretty well last year. So another year for him, hopefully takes another step forward next year. Marlon Humphrey, I still like a ton. And then throwing Kyle Hamilton into the mix of all this, right? Because he's that overhang slot defender, one of these guys I'm lobbying for when I talk about slots going to become the most important position in at least in a secondary. But to me, I think it's become the most pivotal part of an NFL defense. Kyle Hamilton, for what he does from the run game standpoint, but also pass game standpoint, playing that slot, being a tight end eraser, he's invaluable. And then also want to give Marcus Williams his flowers for a defense that is going to run a decent bit of single high. Marcus Williams is a great fit for that. All right, so let's get on to the next portion of this. What I like, Lamar and, Jim Harbaugh, or John Harbaugh, excuse me. Just so much consistency. When these two have been at the top of their game, specifically when Lamar is healthy, this team is just one of the best teams in the AFC. And there's just, when you have that head coach quarterback combo, so much else falls into the right place. So obviously what I like, an elite quarterback, an elite head coach, that's a pretty good place to start this conversation, right? What worries me, wide receiver depth, but again, I'm not super concerned about it. This is one of the best rosters in football. Most people would probably say offensive line depth. But again, you're a Zay Flowers injury away from being ooh, we're back to Bateman, Tez Walker. Don't love that quite as much. They're one premier injury away from being kind of iffy again, or if Mark Andrews gets hurt, then that kind of muddies the water as well. But again, good roster. I'm kind of reaching at straws. I think TJ Tampa was, Tez Walker, one of those two fourth-round picks. Tez Walker was a big addition and adds a little bit of depth, so I'm not as worried about it, but still, he's a rookie, TBD. Biggest wild card is going to be Zach Orr taking over as the defensive coordinator. Not that I'm super worried about it. Going to be a lot of the same principles, and ultimately, even Mike McDonald's defense. Shout out to Bootleg Football; they have a ton of videos kind of talking about this. It's still that Wink Martindale, Rex Ryan defense that's lived in Baltimore forever. It's just kind of simplified in a lot of ways with how they call it and how diverse they can make it based off how they call it and how they structure it, and who knows what assignment and all that sort of stuff. So again, check them out; they do a great job breaking it down. For the sake of today's video, I'm not going to go into all that because it takes a lot to explain. Nevertheless, I think it's going to be a lot of the same, but just naturally, you're moving on from probably the best defensive coordinator in football as he takes a head coaching job. So, some turnover there. And not only that, but, Anthony Weaver leaves, and he's now the DC in Miami. You have a defensive backs coach leave and become the defensive coordinator in Tennessee. So, or I don't know if he was the top choice for playing McDonald, but he ends up being the guy that does it. It would have been interesting to see if Anthony Weaver's still there. Is he the DC? I feel like he probably is as that assistant head coach. He probably would have been the next guy up. So a lot of turnover there on the defensive staff. I think Orr's going to do a fine job. It's going to be more of the same, but naturally I have to just be okay, big time turnover on that staff. Or can you take the reins here? Best addition, I'm going to go with the rookie corners here. there's a lot that this team's done that I've enjoyed. Again, Tez Walker, I think they needed a little bit more receiver depth. Roger Rosengarten, excited about that. But to hit Nate Wiggins at 30, yeah, he's a little slight, but man, he just brings so much speed that, I mean, Brandon Stevens and Marlon Humphrey are good athletes, but like Nate Wiggins is just another gear of fast. And a guy with a ton of man zone flex, can play on, play off. Maybe with his weight, he's primarily playing off, which I think is fine. But with how much Mike McDonald and, this coaching staff, as a disciple of that with Zach Orr as the DC, they're going to vary what they're calling for the most part. But they're going to bring a whole lot of different pressures because of that. So a lot of pressure on that back end. I think Nate Wiggins, with what he could do, man versus zone, I think he fits into whatever that ends up looking like. And then TJ Tampa in the 4th round, like he's totally like a Ravens corner, like the size, a little bit of a disappointing, like 40 time, but I'm not super worried about it. But like he to me screams Baltimore Raven. This was one that like on draft day I was like, they can't keep getting away with this. Excellent value. I thought a guy who to me should have been a 2nd round pick, so absolute steal. But another guy with a ton of man zone versatility. Wish we could have seen him play more man press at Iowa State, but to me he profiles as a guy who would be really good at that. So Wiggins is maybe a guy who's playing a little bit more off. And then TJ Tampa is the guy who could maybe be a little bit more as a press corner. Really like the addition they've added to that secondary with those two guys. Biggest loss, Mike McDonald. Like, not that Zach Orr is going to do a bad job. Not saying that. Mike McDonald was probably the best DC in football last year. So, not even probably. He was. He was. So now he's gone. So, big shoes to fill there for sure. And then bottom line, simply put, this is a Super Bowl contender. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. If Lamar's healthy, this team can go all the way. Now, obviously, they have, a mountain-sized hurdle to clear in the form of Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes, but at the same time, like them, Buffalo, Cincy, you get into a 1-game matchup with KC, who knows what could happen. It's a puncher's shot at that point. So, no, I think this is definitely one of those, those 4 teams to me are like the ones who, to me, are like right there in that running to knock down Kansas City at the top of the AFC. But all right, let's go ahead and move on to the aforementioned Cincinnati Bengals. We start by talking about offensive line here. I'll give it a B. 1 new starter. That's going to be Trent Brown / Amarius Mims. Let's just assume it's Trent Brown year 1, just to let Mims get a little bit more experience and hopefully a full year of just like reps and him not getting hurt. Right? Like, let's continue to let that body build up strength. And also he's like a 6 swing tackle. Like, if you want to get creative and get him on the field, let's find I don't say this often. Let's find some interesting packages with 6 offensive linemen out there, because Mims could be a weapon there. Or honestly, use him as a 3rd tight end. That could be kind of fun too. But kind of like the Steelers that we'll talk about at the end of this video, just the fact that we're talking about this offensive line finally getting to B level, that's huge, and it signals the amount of work they've done in the last 3 years. Because 3 years ago, this offensive line was not B caliber, not even close. So they've done a ton just to get towards this average to above average realm. QB skill group, it's an A. Even with Tyler Boyd gone, like Joe Burrow, to me, Josh Allen's my favorite player in the league. To me, like after Patrick Mahomes, I'm probably taking Joe Burrow at QB2. Like, again, I love Allen. It's close between him and Burrow, but like Burrow's just an assassin, and when he's healthy, it's just it's fun to watch. It's special. So him plus Jamar Chase, and it sounds like they're going to use him more in the slot, especially now with Boyd gone. I'm totally here for that. Again, I'm the slot guy. I'm all about it. Maximize these receivers. Put your best defensive back in the slot. I'm telling you, I think it's a cheat code. But then also getting T. Higgins back, it's going to be probably just for the 1 year on the franchise tag. But this is a team that made it to a Super Bowl a couple years ago, still has the talent there to make it to another one. I think they're putting their chips in the center of the table. And they still have a ton of flexibility. Again, talking about Jamar Chase in the slot, Andre Yeshivas is getting a ton of training camp hype right now. He's a great outside option. It seems like a guy who ultimately we may look back at where he was drafted and say, damn, how did the Bengals get Andre Yeshivas there? But also Mike Gesicki. He's kind of more of a power slot, which we'll come back to that thought in just a second. But big athletic, go look at his basketball and volleyball highlights from high school. Like, yeah, that dude can play on the outside and be used as a mismatch weapon, especially if they're going to put a linebacker out there. He's more athletic than that. If they put a corner on him, let's get some jump ball opportunities for Mike Gesicki. I think he'll dominate there. Or if you want to play Chase more traditional outside, maybe it's a 50-50 split. I still got hope for Charlie Jones to be a sharp route runner, a guy that could stick in the slot. Yeshivas could be an interesting big slot option, but again, coming back to Mike Gesicki, he's much more of a big slot than he is a true inline tight end. So they still got a lot of flexibility, a lot of options there. I like the depth with Yeshivas, as well as Trent Irwin, who's had moments there for the Bengals as well. Charlie Jones, and of course Mike Gesicki, who I mentioned. Even throwing the tight ends in here, I'm a big Eric All guy. That was one of my draft crushes. I'm really bummed that I didn't get him in that dynasty draft. But I'm a big believer in him, and he's back on the field now. So I think All could be their starting tight end by the end of the year. Pass rush, you see it's a pretty low pass rush win rate. Trey Hendrickson was battling a lot of injuries last year. And I also think year 2, Myles Murphy, I did a breakout candidate video. Myles Murphy was my pick for the Bengals. You saw that speed to power. You saw the athleticism. You saw everything you thought was there out of the first round prospect that was Myles Murphy. But then he started to show like the hand usage is a little cleaner versus where it was at Clemson. He's adding a little bit of moves, not super fast or anything like that. It's not like he's not elite with it, but he's adding it and he's using it and he's feeling comfortable using it, which is huge. So you see the big, athletic, moldable ball of clay starting to take its step forward. Sam Hubbard to me is much more of like an early downs run defender type. If Myles Murphy takes a step forward in year 2 and this team gets a dynamic 1-2 punch of him and Hendrickson, now we're talking. And they have some like decent depth guys backing up the rest of the way there at the edge spot, so it's not terrible. Talking about pass rush, losing DJ Reader's huge, and that kind of leads us into run defense too. Like DJ Reader's a big L right there. And from the pass rush standpoint, Chris Jenkins, I don't think is going to be a high-end pass rusher. PJ Hill's not that guy. You really don't have that interior disruptor from a pass rush standpoint. Run defense-wise, there's a world where PJ Hill, Chris Jenkins, that's good enough combo to get it done from a run game standpoint. I am still questioning it just because of how good DJ Reader is, but I do like this linebacking core. C might be a little bit low, but you can see they were ranked 26 in the EPA per rush last year, and now they lost DJ Reader. So there's probably some positive regression towards the mean, but there's also a huge absence in the middle of that defensive line. And then pass defense, this is a little bit of a projection. You can see 25th last year. I was a big DJ Turner guy coming out of Michigan. I just love that 3-cone. I'm a big Mike Hilton guy. Last year kind of felt specifically the first half of last year felt like a bit of a down year for Mike Hilton. I'm gonna assume that gets sorted out. And then obviously Luke Chidobe-Awuzie, that's gonna be a big loss. But I think Lou Anarumo is gonna get back on track. Last year was just kind of a weird oddity where his defense really underperformed, and that hasn't been something we've been saying a lot about Lou Anarumo. All right. Let's get a little bit deeper into it now and talk about what I like. Well, first and foremost, the passing attack. I mean, it's elite. I mean, it's one of maybe the best quarterback plus skill position tandems that we're going to talk about in this entire series. So, yeah, big on the passing attack. Joe Burrow's an assassin. Love those receivers and the depth that comes with it, of course. What worries me is going to be injuries. This is such a cop-out. I understand. But like I said, and you could say the secondary, like I wouldn't hate that. Even kind of going back to pass defense, I'd be remiss not to mention Von Bell coming back. That's big to me. He was an absence. I think they missed a ton last year. Lou Anarumo, when he signed with Carolina, noted how important Von Bell was. And then I think Geno Stone's like the budget baller version of Jesse Bates. Like he's not going to be Jesse Bates, but he's going to get you as close to that skill set as you can at the price point they signed Geno Stone for. So I like that signing too. So I'm feeling a little bit better about the safety situation. Corners, there's still some projection to be had there for sure. So you could say corners, but really Joe Burrow came off one of the best games of his career against San Francisco and then got hurt shortly thereafter. Felt like the Bengals were finally hitting their stride, making their march to being a top team in the AFC. And just like that, injury to Joe Burrow and wins out of the sales. It's all gone. Year's done, basically. Jake Browning did an admirable job, but Super Bowl-wise, the year was done. So can this team stay healthy? If Burrow is healthy and he's playing 17 games plus the playoffs, then I'm feeling good about Cincy. Biggest wild card, DJ Turner, like I said. Liked him a ton coming out of Michigan. Man, zone flex, played bigger than his size, but still a little bit on the slighter side. So it was going to be an interesting projection. But now year 2, this Lou Anarumo defense that is very varied, a lot of man, a lot of zone, cover 3, cover 4, a little bit of everything. Cover 2 in there, he sprinkles it up pretty evenly. Can DJ Turner take that step forward in year 2? If so, that's huge for the secondary, and I'm feeling a whole lot better about it going this year. If he continues to struggle, this is going to be a team that needs to make a move at the deadline then, because they're going to need to acquire a starter. And it may not be something sexy, but like kind of the Bills last year with Rasul Douglas, like, oh shit, we need one more guy. We need a guy. And then they ended up getting him, and he plays really good football. If DJ Turner doesn't take that step forward, look out for the Bengals. They're going to be probably in the corner market some way, somehow. And I almost wonder if they, there's still some decent corners still out and about. Like, do they call Stephon Gilmore? Do they call Xavier Howard? Does anything like that happen? Best addition, I'm going to go with that right tackle spot. Trent Brown, Amarius Mims. Right tackle and left guard have been a problem spot. Tackle's a little bit more valuable than guard, so I'm going to give them the nudge there. Also, they didn't address left guard, so can't give them an addition prop there to a position they did not address. Biggest loss, DJ Reader. We've already hit on this. I mean, just one of the best defensive line. He doesn't purely play nose, not like Dexter Lawrence, where it's, he's nose tackle pretty much snap in, snap out, but he does a lot of that. But he's just one of the best runs defenders, one of the best pass rushers at the interior defensive line spot. That's not named, Chris Jones, Christian Wilkins, Dexter Lawrence, guys like that. He's like that next tier down. He's not like tier 1 IDL. He's probably tier 2, but he's like the top of tier 2, and it's a big L right there for that Bengals defensive line. Then we get to bottom line against Super Bowl contender. I'm not going to give a firm, I think this team wins the division at the end of this video, but I will give you kind of where I'm leaning right now. And then later on, towards the end of training camp, I'm going to do my official, here are my record predictions, here's who I think wins each division, and here's my Super Bowl prediction. So we will get there eventually. Be sure to stick around to the channel to see that. But this is the team that can go blow for blow with Kansas City, and oftentimes, specifically in the playoffs, when they have gone head-to-head with Kansas City, they've been the side to come out on top. All right, let's move on to the Cleveland Browns then. And offensive line, another year where we're talking about this being one of the best O-lines in football. Yeah, it's getting a little bit older on the interiors with, Bitonio. Pochich has been pretty solid. But I like the depth this team has, too. Luke Whippler, I thought was a great scheme fit, great day 3 ad. I don't know how he fell that far. Could have been their starter right away. He's just kind of waiting in the wings for, Pochich to give up that job. They add Zach Zinter. I think that's a starter in the making there for Cleveland. So then you look at the tackle spots. Jedrick Wills has been a little disappointing. Conklin coming off an injury. DeJuan Jones, great depth. And even you look at their backup left tackle and Hakeem Adeniji, a guy who's played some football, not great football there for the Bengals, but he has played and he has been relied on as a starter. And no Bill Callahan there, but I do wonder if the Browns get a little bit more out of him from a coaching standpoint than what Cincy could. But nevertheless, I wonder if DeJuan Brown gets an opportunity to battle it out with Wills at left tackle. That is obviously a little tricky because we're coming off a year where Conklin got hurt and DeJuan Jones had to play a lot of right tackle. So, disappointing first round pick, guy coming off an injury. It's not ideal, but if Conklin comes back to who he was pre-injury, that's a great starter. And if Jedrick Wills breaks out in year 5, then you got a great tandem there. Or there's a world where DeJuan Jones is their better left tackle and him and Conklin hold it down. So all in all, I'm still going to give it an A-. I think there's a really solid starting 5 to be had there, some way or fashion, and there's some depth to go behind it. QB skill position group, I'm going to go B+. Let's start with Amari Cooper. I'm still a big Amari Cooper fan. Jerry Jeudy, he's been disappointing as a first rounder, but this is the best quarterback situation he's had. We'll come back to Watson in just a moment. And Njoku coming off a breakout year. Year 2 of Elijah Moore in Cleveland. Cedric Tillman, second round pick of memory serves, if not second. Actually, it might have been a third, but still, day 2 pick that barely saw the field last year. This is a deep skill position group, and then you throw in some backs that are interesting and hoping the best for Deonta Foreman and his scary injury, getting helicoptered out to Roanoke, Virginia. That is crazy, but hopefully all is well with Mr. Foreman. And then we bring this all back to Deshaun Watson, because ultimately it's the engine that's going to make the car go. It's the straw that stirs the drink. If he's no good, then everything else kind of falls by the wayside. But if he's, and it takes me back to the Jets a few years ago, right? Where will they go after Derek Carr? Will they go after Jimmy Garoppolo? Will they go after Aaron Rodgers? It feels like I'm in the same spot here, but just with tiers of what Deshaun Watson could be. If he's fine, this team probably makes the playoffs. If he's good, they might win a playoff game. I'm not saying he's going to get back to 2020, but if he can get close to it, if he can get 85% of the way there, this is a dark horse team that could, go from, a little spoiler here, I'm going to have him as playoff contender. If he takes a step forward from last year and gets to 85, 90% of what he was in 2020, this is a team that could be a Super Bowl contender because I like the defense that much, and I think there's a really solid supporting cast around him with a good O-line in front of him. Question mark here is going to be Nick Chubb, too, on that offense, too. I'm hoping, again, Steelers fan here, but I love watching Nick Chubb. I think he's one of the best, just pure running backs to watch in the NFL, so I'm hoping the best that he bounces back. But can Watson be better? Is he about the same? Can he play 17 games? A lot of question marks here, and it all comes back to him. I think there's better talent than what we saw last year. And another thing to take into account here, Ken Dorsey coming into the building. Stefanski still calling plays. I'm really curious to see with Dorsey, with what he's done with Josh Allen in Buffalo, how much say does he have in that room, and how much does that change things in that Stefanski-Watson dynamic? Let me know, Browns fans. I've heard Stefanski's calling plays. I've also heard a couple people say that Dorsey is, so I don't know. I'm finding some conflicting stuff, but most of the stuff I've seen is Stefanski. Browns fans, let me know down below. Pass rush A+. You have the best pass rusher in football. Coming from a Steelers fan, it's okay. TJ Watt's an awesome second best pass rusher, third best pass rusher in football, maybe even fourth, but that's just, it's an awesome position group in the NFL right now. It's okay. He's still elite. But nonetheless, Myles Garrett to me is the best, both from a run game standpoint, pass rush standpoint. Zadarius Smith deserved his extension. Dalvin Tomlinson comes with a little bit of pass rush juice. Add Michael Hall Jr. in the second round. That's a dude who in passing downs is going to be an absolute force on the interior. And they even got depth with guys like Alex Wright, Ogbo Okoronkwo. They've invested in that defensive line. And I think Jim Schwartz, that's what made his hire make so much sense. He's not a name that's oh my God, he's changing his scheme and, or he's not even just one of those hires that oh my God, this changes everything. It's more when he got hired, it was okay, solid, okay. But it coincided with this team investing so much in that defensive line, and that's what Schwartz wants. Rush 4, drop 7. Keep it simple. And I'll vary up the coverages, but honestly, with this team, not really. Have you seen these corners? We're playing man coverage, we're rushing 4. Done. Like, there you go. Get after it, guys. And they're damn good at it, so I don't blame them whatsoever. So that's where, like, he was the right hire at the right time with the right amount of investment put into this defensive line. So you can see second in pass rush win rate last year. Run defense was still really solid. Siaki Ika, interested to see what he might be able to do in year 2, but honestly, Dalvin Tomlinson in and of himself, such a good run defender that I'm here for it. Even Shelby Harris still got some good football in his. He still got some gas in the tank. Still got some good football left in tread on his tires. Good football left in his future. So how hard is it to say good football left in his future? I couldn't find the words there. But yeah, I think he's a solid player. Maybe the linebacker core is a little weak, so maybe you can make this a B. But ultimately, I think B plus is fine. This has been a team that's stopped the run pretty well. Also helps when you're great against the pass. You can kind of pigeonhole teams into that spot and anticipate it. And then you can see pass defense. Yeah, number 1 in EPA per play, minus 0.24. I mean, this is not how it works in real life football. Every time you pass against the Browns, you lose a quarter of a point. It comes off the board. It'd be kind of fun if it did, but like think about that over the course of a 17-game season, throw in a playoff game. That's insane. Credit to Denzel Ward. MJ Emerson's one of the most underrated players in the league. Garrett's a dog. Zadarius Smith, dog. Like, yeah, this defense is rocked up. All right, let's get on and talk a little bit more about what I like about with the Cleveland Browns. The defense, we've already talked about it. I like it at all 3 levels. Like the Jim Schwartz hire. Yeah, it's a great unit right now. What worries me is Deshaun Watson. I think there's a reality where he plays better than last year and he plays the full season. But year over year, my outlook on it, like the percentage chance I give that gets lower and lower year over year. So it's becoming less and less likely, but I still think it is somewhat likely. But honestly, even if he just maintained to play like solid football and could play 17 games, that's pretty big. The concern is going to be, okay, what happens if he gets hurt and you get Jameis Winston football? Or what happens if Deshaun Watson just continues to not mesh with this offense? I don't want to say continues, but like what if it takes a step back? Then we get into problematic stuff, not only for like this team and what they should be versus where they will be, but like the money they're paying Watson. Like this has got to work. And it's like an uncomfortable corner to back yourself into where this has to work, and like haven't been able to find that magic remedy just yet. Biggest wild card, I'll say Jedrick Wills Jr. Because if he takes a step forward, then it's like, dude, we have DeJuan Jones as a swing tackle. Like, are you kidding me? Yeah, sign me up for that. And if he lives up to that first round status, a first round that featured just paid Tristan Wirfs and Andrew Thomas, one of the best left tackles in football, then you're feeling really good about that O-line. But if he doesn't, then you're looking at a spot where, like, okay, we might have to sacrifice the contingency plan for Conklin, like I said earlier, and flip DeJuan Jones over to left tackle, and then hope things play out okay. And maybe Adeniji is ultimately your Conklin, contingency there at right tackle. But I'm hoping the best for Wills. And it's a big year for him, too, right? Because, like, he could break out with the Browns and then go hit free agency and go get himself a bag. So it's a big year for him personally as well. Biggest addition, I'm going to go Jerry Jeudy. It's not a team that did a whole lot. You could say Michael Hall Jr. here, and I don't hate it, just because it's a very different interior pass rush type of body and like skill set than what they have right now. But I'll say Jerry Jeudy, former first-round pick who's a sharp route runner. And like I said, I mean, Deshaun Watson's not been great in Cleveland, but he's better than Case Keenum and Joe Flacco and Russell Wilson and Jarrett Stidham, right? I think we can all agree on that. Like, he's better than those guys, especially given where those veterans were at that point in their career playing in Denver. So this is the best quarterback play he's had in his career. Like, all right, that's feeling like it's a step up. And also, like, he's not in an offense where, like, you're the first-round pick. You're the number one guy. Step up, bud. No, you got Amari Cooper there, and you got Njoku coming off a year breakout season. Jeudy could start the year as, like, option 3, really, in the offense. Maybe he's option 2 over Njoku, but all the weight of the offense is not on this dude's shoulders. So I'm really interested to see what this season looks like for him. I'm hoping it's a breakout year because I liked him a ton coming out of Bama. And then, like, long-term, like, do you see him as someone who could eventually replace Amari Cooper? If he balls out this year, I think they're going to view him as like, okay, cool, we can move on from Amari Cooper. And that's going to allow us to get Cedric Tillman on the field more. Like, I think that could be a possibility. Again, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here. But if he has a breakout season, I wonder what's going to happen with Amari Cooper next offseason. Biggest loss, Joe Flacco, I guess. Like, again, not a whole lot of loss this offseason. Nothing crazy. Nothing that really retools this roster, shakes it up drastically. Joe Flacco played some good football down the stretch, though. I mean, some games was Joe Flacco to a T, though, where it's like, dude, this guy's finding defenders, and he's just so lucky that they're not catching it. There's some of that. And you get some of that in the playoff game, too. Game script kind of dictated him to play a little too aggressive, maybe. But nevertheless, like even just his willingness to stretch the field, push the ball, and force defenses to be stretched out that way opened up so much more underneath, like David Njoku as a yak weapon. Like, there's no coincidence that Flacco starts airing it out. They start pushing the ball deep down the field, and all of a sudden Njoku is becoming one of the best yak weapons at the tight end spot in the league. To me, it's not a coincidence. So I guess Flacco, biggest loss? Browns fans, let me know your thoughts. Bottom line here, playoff contender. And if Watson plays better than he did last year and he plays the entire season, we might have our third Super Bowl contender here in the AFC North. I think this is the best division in football pretty comfortably. I don't want to say pretty comfortably, but like as of right now, the way I look at it, yeah. The AFC East, depending on the Pats, maybe could start making it interesting. The NFC West starting to get pretty good. Like I could see that going back to maybe being the next best division. The NFC North, honestly, it's probably the North. It's the AFC North, NFC North, and then maybe the NFC West, depending on the Cardinals this year, could work themselves in that conversation. But yeah, I think this is just a great division. It really is. And it's kind of unfortunate they all got to beat up on each other. But man, this is a true wildcard team because Watson, more than just about anybody else, really feels like the barometer of success. How good is he? That's going to dictate how good this team is, which you can say that about a lot of quarterbacks. But nevertheless, I'm optimistic about what it's going to be this year. I think Watson's going to keep getting better. I'm really excited to see what Ken Dorsey and his effect might be for this team. All right, let's get on to my favorite team here. And I'll try not to get too long-winded here because I know I can talk a while about the Pittsburgh Steelers. 10-7 last year. They ranked third in the division. Did make the playoffs. Mason Rudolph led the Pittsburgh Steelers in the playoffs. Two new starters on the offensive line. First-round pick, Troy Fautanu, used to play right tackle in high school. So I think this ultimately worked out, and I wonder if that's why he fell. Because I just didn't. He was my OT too, and I just did not see a world where he was making it to 21, where the Steelers were, 2021. I just didn't see it happening. And I wonder if he was like telling teams, preferably I'd play on the right side. And if that's the case, maybe I could see where a team like the Jets is like, let's go get the left tackle in Olu Fashanu. It then makes me kind of wonder why the Saints didn't take him, because that feels like a perfect Ryan Ramczyk replacement. But nevertheless, worked out really well for the Steelers because Broderick Jones has said openly that like I'm a left tackle. I play much more comfortably on the left side. So Fautanu back on his more comfortable side. Broderick Jones, same thing. And then the other new starter, Zach Frazier. Mason Cole was just not cutting it at center. Zach Frazier, a little bit of stubby arms for sure, but also a wrestling background. Really nimble on his feet for this zone blocking scheme. He's a great fit. And honestly, with his movement skills, I think he's going to be able to dictate the point of contact just as much as people with longer arms are against him. And he's got a great amount of play strength. I'm not worried about Zach Frazier all that much. And then the two guards next to him, Sam Alu, James Daniels, solid. Mason McCormick, I assume, is going to be the James Daniel replacement next year. Maybe there's a world where they bring back Daniels just because he's still he's not the oldest offensive lineman. I think he'll be 29 next offseason. I had to double check that. So maybe McCormick sits for a second year and then he becomes a Sam Alu replacement. Either way, I like the Mason McCormick addition as well in the fourth round. Some additional depth there for one of those two guards who eventually will not be a Steeler. But I'm going to give this team a B. Same thing we talked about with the Bengals. Just the fact that, if you told me 3 years ago the Steelers were eventually going to get to a B offensive line, I'd be like, how much investment? How many first round picks? Like, what did we do to get there? Because that's impressive. They did it. And really was just 2 first-round picks at tackle, a steal in my opinion in Zach Frazier, a couple of decent signings in free agency, $8 million a year for Sam Alu, $8 million a year for James Daniels. Honestly, they did it in a really responsible way. So yeah, I'm really impressed with this 3-year turnaround on this offensive line. Now, if only, me being a smart-ass Steelers fan, if only instead of drafting the running back, then fixing the offensive line, we could have had a world where this offensive line had been fixed, and then you draft Najee Harris. Like, if this was rookie year Najee Harris behind this O-line, I still wouldn't be like take him in the first round hype, but then I'd be like, oh shit, this could be fun. But that's not the world we live in, and honestly, Jaylen Warren might be the more explosive guy behind this offensive line. It can be a fun 1-2 punch to the backfield, anyways. QB and skill group. This is a tough one because I'm in the clear Justin Fields camp. I don't get the point of starting Russell Wilson. He got benched last year for Jarrett Stidham. Part of that is for money for sure. But at the same time, if Russell Wilson was living up to the money he was making, you wouldn't have issue, right? Like, the Chiefs don't ever get into a spot where they're like, let's not start Patrick Mahomes because you don't want to pay him money next year, Josh, like an elite quarterback, a good quarterback is worth the money that they're getting paid. So the fact that they're like, let's start Jarrett Stidham so we don't have to pay him, that signals a lot to me. And then, like, if one of these two guys is going to be the starter for the Steelers in 3 years, who is it? There's only one option. There's only one of these two guys that could be starting for the Steelers in 3 years. So why not see what Justin Fields is about now and make that decision sooner rather than later? To me, that makes sense. I don't know. I've seen some Steelers buzz about Russell Wilson. I just don't see it. I actually don't really think he's that good of a fit for Arthur Smith, other than like Arthur Smith wants to dictate his offense by pounding the rock and setting up play action off of that, but it's really play action to attack the middle of the field, and that's not been a Russell Wilson thing. Justin Fields has a lot of room to grow as a passer for sure, but I think at least with his legs, you got to put a guy in a QB spot, and it takes one more guy to coverage, opens up the middle of the field a little bit more. So to me, I think Fields is a better fit. I think he brings more upside. I think he's got the opportunity to maybe be a long-term starter, where that's just not true about Russell Wilson. This is like a one-year thing, and maybe, let's say he gets back on track. A year after that, maybe there's one more year, so like, I don't know. So if this was Justin Fields as a starter, maybe I'd make this C+, because I am a little more optimistic about it. But also, this is a team right now that, like, it's so funny. I was talking to my friend about this. Like, you look at this receiver room, and Pickens, okay, I like Pickens. To me, he feels a little bit more like a 1B than a 1A, to be honest, but okay. All right, I like George Pickens. But then who's your 2? Roman Wilson? All right, well, he's out for, 6 to 8 weeks, right? Like, they're expecting him to be ready by regular season, but he just suffered an injury, and they're going to take it pretty slow. Okay, so number 2 is Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin, Scotty Miller's the 3. Like, what are we doing here? Like, it's not good. And what I was talking to my friend about is, like, you take this Steelers receiving room, and right now it's like, Like, you're not excited about it. You're like, okay. If you add Brandon Ayuk in the mix, and I know a lot of Steelers fans don't want him to be paid, all due respect, I think you're crazy. I think you're insane. You pay elite receivers the money that they're worth. Look at what Tyreek has done with Tua, and some of it's vice versa, but that's the impact that the Steelers offense could use. And I've been calling Deontay Johnson poor man's Brandon Ayuk, so the fact that we could go out there and get him, it sounds like it's not going to happen, but to me, there's no reason not to go make that trade. And then if you add Brandon Ayuk, this team goes from like a receiver room that makes you say, to like, eyes emoji. Like, one guy makes that difference to me. So if they add Brandon Ayuk, this probably becomes like B+, B+ probably. Because I do like the running backs, and Muth hopefully has a breakout year. He's been kind of disappointing as a second-round pick. And then, George Pickens is that 1B. And Calvin Austin, Van Jefferson, Scotty Miller, Roman Wilson, all these guys as the number 3 receiver. Not that Arthur Smith uses a ton of 3 receiver sets. Hopefully that's changing. But if it doesn't, those guys are solid depth options. So I just don't know. I don't know. It's George Pickens and a lot of meh right now until we get to see Roman Wilson come back from the injury. I like the backfield. And then as long as Russell Wilson's starting, I am going to be an honorary Bills fan. Let's just put it that way. Deontay Johnson's the major departure from 2023. Missing a letter there. Not the year 2000 or 202. Not that far. Pass rush A, TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, one of the best tandems in football. Keanu Benton, I think, is going to get a bigger snap share. At least he should. And if he doesn't, I'm going to have smoke coming out of my ears. He needs to be a bigger impact on the defensive line. If Cam Hayward stays healthy and they give Benton a bigger snap share, this defensive front is going to be a force. Like 3rd and 13, Benton and Hayward in the middle with Watt and Highsmith pinning their ears back. Good luck. That's all I got to say, because that's the front 4. That's the pass rush you want in 3rd and long right there for the Steelers, and it's an elite 4-man rush. Run defense, I'll go B+. I was a little surprised, actually, that the EPA per rush was as good as it was per Sumer Sports. I feel like the Steelers are pretty good against the run. They just have like 3 games a year, maybe 4, where it's just like, damn, dude, we can't stop a nosebleed right now. Like, we legitimately have no answer for this. And I do feel like it's a lot of times when, like, later in the season, maybe Cam Hayward's a little banged, especially last year. Like, when Cam Hayward was on the field, teams were just running. Like, that was their on-off split. Hayward's off, we're running. Hayward's on, we're passing. Like, the Bills legitimately were just, like, depending on if Hayward's out there, that was run-pass split option. So hopefully this year he's healthier, and hopefully, again, Keanu Benton, I think he plays the run well with his quicks, not necessarily with his size and mass, but with his quicks, he can shoot gaps. And also, I think Landon Roberts, he's a really solid run defender for the Steelers last year. He's still got that trick up his sleeve, if you want to call it that. Cole Holcomb, more of a coverage guy, but then also you bring in Patrick Queen. I said earlier, he's a great downhill linebacker. I was questioning the signing, but not a whole lot of guaranteed money. And I think as like an attacking linebacker, using him as a blitzer, letting him play the run, he's gotten a lot better in that realm. So I do think this is a pretty solid run defense. And I just hope that we, instead of having those 3 to 4 games a year where it's like, dude, why is this team carving us up on the ground? The Cardinals kind of did it to us last year. Like James Conner, in a revenge game, of course, has a handful of big runs, especially in the second half. And you're like, what is happening here? The Cardinals offensive line should not be moving us like this. Hopefully, those 3 to 4 games don't happen this year. And then I could put this team in like A run defense. That'd be great. Pass defense, that's not supposed to say CB. It's just supposed to say B. Whoops. My bad. It could teeter to C+, but it's supposed to say B. I'm optimistic about Joey Porter Jr. going into year 2. I am not optimistic about Dante Jackson. He hasn't been a good football player at this point in his career. I don't see that changing. I will say this is a defense that, first and second down, it's cover 3. And this is a man. Yeah, this is a defense that plays cover 3 and man. So I feel like Dante Jackson's going to be a relatively, I don't want to say simple defense, but I feel like he'll be able to pick it up pretty quick. And his athleticism hopefully plays a little bit more, especially in like those cover 3 sets. And then you get to third down with this defense, and that's where Mike Tomlin, Terrell Austin, they'll send those fire zone blitzes and stuff like that. They'll bring some heat then. Not that they always need to, but they'll spice you up there. But for the most part, early downs, it's going to be pretty chalk. But Mika Fitzpatrick, stud, Chuck Clark, or Deshaun Elliott, love that signing, just to have one more guy in the mix that we're, if we can, let's keep Mika Fitzpatrick over the top. I like the idea of him playing slot, especially given what our slot position is looking like right now, other than Cam Sutton, which I guess I'll talk about next. But Mika Fitzpatrick is like the over-the-top free safety playmaker. Sign me up for that. Would love to see more of that. I think Deshaun Elliott gives you that flexibility. And then talking about Cam Sutton, this is tough because I used to really be a big Cam Sutton guy when he was a Steeler. Not that I was like, he's elite, pay him $20 million a year. No. I just thought he was a really solid football player and he's a good Steeler. And then he goes out there and gets a domestic assault charge, and I just have a hard time supporting those individuals. So that makes it pretty tricky. And 8-game suspension, I'm pretty sure I saw. So it's going to be a while before he's back in the black and gold. But nevertheless, when he is, you run your 4-3 base, he's your second corner, he plays on the outside. When you go nickel, he plays the nickel. And he's by far and away the best slot option we have on the Steelers right now. And as a guy who loves that position and wants to have it valued, the Steelers have just not gotten on that same wavelength with me just yet, unfortunately. But once Sutton's back, hopefully he can be a good player in that role for Pittsburgh. But you can see last year, 10th in EPA per pass. That's a lot better than I would have thought. And I think a big part of that second half of the year, Joey Porter, which I will say, Joey Porter Jr., very handsy. There's a lot of things when you go back and revisit Steelers games where you're like, that probably could have been called. That could have been a flag. And again, saying this as a Steelers fan, I'm not trying to be anti-Homer here or anything like that. I'm not trying to course correct. There's just a couple of things where I'm like, he probably could have been called for a flag, but he didn't. So can't hate him on that. So I want to see how much more clean maybe that technique gets this going into year 2 for Joey Porter Jr. But guys, let me know what you think about the AFC North. Who's going to come out on top of the division? If I had to guess right now, I'm going to take the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm a big believer in the Ravens. I love their process, love Lamar Jackson, love John Harbaugh. But the Bengals were my Super Bowl pick last year. Burrow gets hurt right after that great game against the Niners. I think of the Bengals, that Burrow stays healthy. I think they're the team that gives Kansas City, that's the team that scares KC the most, in my opinion. But so I'm going to take the Bengals, but I honestly, them and the Ravens to me are kind of playoff locks. And the Steelers and Browns, one of those two, not too far off, right? So, yeah, going to be a fun division to watch. No doubt about it. But guys, that is going to do it for this preview of the AFC North. Let me know what you think about this division and who's going to come out on top down below in the comment section. What would you grade each of these, offensive line, quarterbacks, what's the biggest strength of all these rosters? I'd love to know your thoughts on all 4 of these teams down below in the comment section. As well as, kind of give me an idea, PFF screenshots for the lineups, our lads. Do you want to do this individual team based, or do you want to do it division by division? To me, I think division by division just makes this a little bit more of a worthwhile video to click on versus a 10-minute preview of a team that you probably already have a decent idea about. Here you get 4 teams to talk about versus just one. But I'd love to hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej, and I am signing off.